Hello, everyone. I'm Augie Napoli, President and CEO of the United Way of Greater Cleveland.
I'm Danielle Sitnor, President of the Cleveland branch of the NAACP. Together, we are honored to present to the community this series of community conversations on the Cleveland Consent Decree. Each session will focus on an area of the consent decree and police reform through a conversation among experts and community leaders to provide insight and to re-engage the community.
The objective of these conversations is to provide a forum to raise awareness and increase community engagement on the consent decree and how it affects members of our community. United Way's mission is being a voice for those in need. We know that there are so many underlying aspects of poverty which are hard to see and equally hard to discuss and solve. And certainly systemic racism is a main contributor to generational poverty that has afflicted our community for far too long. Not one organization can solve inequity, and I am humbled to be only a small part of a group of esteemed community leaders from whom you will have the privilege to hear in this series.
For 108 years, the Cleveland branch of the NAACP has worked to improve the political, educational, social, and economic status of minority groups, to eliminate racial prejudice, and to keep the public aware of the adverse effects of racial discrimination, and to take lawful action to secure its elimination. This community conversation and the monthly topics we will address related to the Cleveland Consent Decree are right in line with the work our organization has addressed and championed every day for over a century right here in Cleveland. Through this series, you will hear about the current status of the Cleveland Consent Decree and the future of policing in the city. And as the name of this event suggests, this is a two-way dialogue, and we want to hear from you tonight and every month in this series as we tackle these various topics.
I'd like to thank Cuyahoga Community College and Rockwell Automation for sponsoring and making this series possible. I would also like to thank the City Club of Cleveland for partnering with us in hosting the series of events, and WVIZ for simulcasting this evening's discussion live on 95.9 FM. We'd also like to thank all of our community partners.
Tonight's topic is the families and communities building resilience. Over the last year, the world has been devastated by a pandemic and acts of violence. We have watched, sometimes helplessly, as members of our families and communities have been victims of violent behaviors, including police shootings. Cleveland families impacted by such distress have found diverse ways to react to these traumatic events by running for elected office, advocating for new legislation, creating foundations, and providing support to others who have also experienced the same types of tragic loss. Tonight's conversation is an opportunity to share experiences, identify individual and community support systems, and discuss one's capacity to give back when facing enormous loss. Tonight's moderator is Rick Jackson, senior host and producer at WVIZ, PBS, and WCPN FM. Rick has over 40 years of experience as an anchor and reporter for network and local television news, public television, and commercial and public radio news. Rick currently hosts ideastream's Sound of Ideas talk show and NewsDepth, viewed on WVIZ and online. I am honored this evening to introduce tonight's conversation moderator, Rick Jackson.
Danielle, thank you so much. Augie, thank you so much as well for the introduction. Thank you to the United Way of Greater Cleveland and the Cleveland branch of the NAACP for this opportunity, this invitation to moderate this very important discussion tonight. Thank you as well to the City Club of Cleveland hosting this series of events, and as Augie said, to WOVU for simulcasting this evening's discussion, which is live on 95.9 FM. WOIO Channel 19 is also live streaming this discussion on their website, cleveland19.com. Just so everybody understands the plan for our interaction this evening, our purpose in the time we have is to hear directly from some of the people most closely involved to these often deadly, in this case, always deadly encounters between citizens and the police who serve us. Perhaps they were too shocked at the time to speak publicly as they do now. Perhaps they weren't aware of the impact that their words could have. They know that now. I will first be talking individually with each panelist, providing each the time to share their incredibly difficult experience. We'll hear what they would like tonight's audience to take away from this discussion. After I've spoken with each panelist, then I'll be asking questions of the entire group, round robin style. Following that will come your time, a public question and answer segment where inquiries from the community will actually be heard and shared with our panel, and they will answer you directly. You can actually start texting your questions now during any point of the program. Phone number is 216-307-5632. It's there on your screen for you, 216-307-5632. We would appreciate it, of course, if your questions are respectful, quick, and help to advance our dialogue. Now, for this session, we are joined by 4 women who each lost a loved one after an encounter with Cleveland police. They'll speak about the time since their loved one was taken, the efforts to move forward, what some of the rest of us need to do to help in seeking justice, and the resilience these families, these friends, these survivors, and others have to find months and years later. We'll hear from Brenda Bickerstaff. Ms. Bickerstaff is the sister of Craig Bickerstaff, who was 27 years old when he died in 2002. Alicia Kirkman is with us, mother of Angelo Miller, who was 17 years old when he died. That was in 2007. Samaria Rice is here. She's the mother of Tamir Rice, who was just 12 years old when he died in 2014. And Bernadette Rolen is here, the mother of Daniel Ficker, who was 27 years old when he died. That was in 2011. We'll also be speaking with Dr. Victoria Winbush. She's a professor of social work at Cleveland State University. Dr. Winbush teaches courses in human behavior, social work practice, and oppression and racism. Now, previously, she had served as the executive director of the Multicultural Training Institute for the Mental Health Board in Cuyahoga County. Our curator tonight is Alicia Ellis. Ms. Ellis is the founder of the multimedia relationship building platform Mas Luray. She is also the co-founder of the women's empowerment group, Fierce Women on Board. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to all of you tonight. And we began, as I said, with Brenda Bickerstaff. Brenda, your brother was shot and killed by Cleveland police in 2002, as we said, a killing later ruled justified. You've been in the public eye many of these years since. The family filed suit, you accepted a small settlement, but start here for me. What's been lost? What do you want people to know about Craig other than what happened on the day he died?
I want people to know that Craig was not the person that they tried to portray him to be, that he was a loving, kind person. He graduated from Lincoln West High School in 1993. He played football, he played wrestling. He was a father of 2 daughters, Kanisha and Arabia. He was loved by his sisters. He has 8 sisters, he has 3 brothers. 3 of his brothers is deceased now. 2 of his older sisters just recently died the early part of this year, 4 months apart. He was not they try to make him seem like he was like a bad person in the community, but he was a good person, and he was a person of integrity. He had his background issues that he dealt with, but he respected the system and he respected police. Our dad was a police officer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that your father was a police officer. You mentioned the way his reputation's been put out there, the way he's been painted. The day of his death, do you accept the version that we've all read and heard and seen, the battle with officers, the disengagement, the re-engagement, or do you have doubts about that even today, all these years later?
Okay, going back to You want me to talk about what happened back in 2002?
Yeah, give some people a little bit of context, not the total detail, but some context so they understand where you're coming from.
Okay, well, that morning Craig was going to see his friend Lionel Williams on Lee Avenue. He went to go pick up some tapes. Lionel said, man, get out coming from my house at 7 o'clock in the morning. Craig was on his way going to see his two daughters in Akron. So when Craig went out the house, going towards his car, Raymond Chipkis and his partner, Antonio Matijo, stopped him, okay? Apparently they had got a call, and I'm still waiting on that call. They got a call apparently that he was trying to break into a car. Well, I know number one, that's not true because the car that he was driving was in my name. That's number one. So number two, they said he complied. They asked him to comply. He put his hands on top of the car. Craig did have a weapon. Craig was trying to get away from them. Antonio Matijo said he has a weapon. Craig grabbed the weapon, threw the weapon towards the house where he came from, Lionel's house. The gun went up and fell down by the bushes. And what I want people to know too, I am glad that Lionel told the truth because Lionel could have easily said that Craig didn't have a weapon. Lionel said he did have a weapon. The first thing I asked him, did Craig draw the weapon on the officer? He said, absolutely not. Chipkis then backed up and shot Craig 5 times in the back, where Craig unfortunately did not survive. But I'm gonna tell you this too. He told Mary Bounds, who was the chief of police back in 2002, that my brother pulled a weapon on him. But guess what? I found out 20 years later, Raymond Chipkis was involved in another incident. And through a deposition that he was involved with, they asked him, was he ever involved in deadly force? He said, yes, with my brother. They asked him, what did he use? And he indicated it was his size. My brother weighed 250 pounds more than Raymond Chipkis, so Raymond Chipkis shot him. So Craig did not have a weapon, and that's what he had a weapon, but he did not draw the gun on the officer. And this is what I've been searching for the last 20 years. And me now being a private investigator, I was able to uncover that information, and I do have in my possession a copy of that sworn statement done by Raymond Chipkis.
Thank you. You brought out 2 points that I really wanted people to understand that you are a private detective now, and you are the daughter of a police officer.
Private investigator.
Private investigator, yes. You know, you're in a better place maybe than anybody on the panel, certainly anybody in the audience who's not in uniform, to understand police tactics. You know what's going on, but when I talk to you, I still hear anger, I still hear hurt, I still hear frustration, and I hear lots of questions. What do you want to hear from the Division of Police?
What do I want to hear from the Division of Police?
Yes.
The only thing that I want to hear from the Division of Police and the county prosecutor's office and the federal prosecutor, that they would file federal murder charges against Raymond Chipkis. Because number one, he lied and said that my brother drew a gun on him. And that is not true. Absolutely not true. I have proof of it. Okay. That's what I want to hear.
I know that you've also lost a niece while she was in police custody, a different department, but no less painful. Is it important the audience know that you're not just crusading against Cleveland police, you would like to see better policing in general?
Absolutely. Rakina Jones is my niece, and she died in Cleveland Heights custody, unfortunately. And the issue with that, I'm not going to go too deep off in that, but the issue with that is that they failed to watch her after she was taken to Metro Health Medical Center for some medical issues. They were supposed to watch her and they did not. Matter of fact, I found out, because I worked with their lawyer on the case, Steve Gording, I found out that they memory in their camera had went out and the memory was full, and they thought that they were still looking at her, but what they was looking at was an image, and she had already passed away.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. I know you have a lot more to say. We'll get back to you in the group session coming up. Next up is Alicia Kirkman, who lost a teenage son to an off-duty officer, though he was in uniform. He was working security at 79th and Lexington. Alicia, again, our condolences. Outside from what we know in the police report, who was Angelo?
Angelo was my bouncing baby boy. Angelo was my everything. Angelo was 17 years old, and I was still dropping Angelo off to school at high school. And Angelo would still give me a kiss like he was still my 5-year-old. You know, still, you know, that loving, funny Angelo. He brought joy to all of us, to my whole family. He walked into a room, you know, you can't be unhappy around Angelo, because Angelo is gonna make you laugh. He's gonna make you smile. And, you know, he was my everything. You know, he was only 17. He didn't get a chance to become a man. And he had 2 sons. Angelo was a father. And his 2 sons didn't get a chance to know their father.
Many Black women with teenage sons share the nightmare that for you, unfortunately, came true. Had you talked to Angelo about interactions with the police, what to do when you're stopped? Was he armed with that knowledge?
No, he wasn't. He wasn't armed with that knowledge. And I think about that each and every day. Angelo was not. And Angelo actually, you know, when you ask your child what they want to be when they grow up, Angelo wanted to be a police officer.
Simple question, but one I know will come from the audience if I don't ask it here. How do you go on?
Prayer, starting off with prayer. That's one of the ways I go on. And I continue to fight. I continue to fight for justice. I want murder charges against the officer that killed Angelo. I support other families, you know, who go through the same thing I have endured. You know, it's been 14 years since my baby been gone. So that's been a long time that, you know, I've been in this fight.
Like Brenda's family, you've accepted a settlement from the city, but I know you've also spoken about how attorneys for the city derive a value for the life lost. Do you think we need some kind of greater separation between justice and enforcement?
Yes. Yes, we need charges, you know. The whole thing when it comes to settlements and the families being paid, we need cops to be charged with murder. You know, if we get more cops charged with murder, they'll stop killing. They'll stop killing.
That's something we're going to get into when we have all 4 of you on together. Thank you, Alicia Kirkman. Appreciate your talk tonight. Samaria Rice is likely the most recognized of the women here, as well as being the most recent addition to this painful coterie. Tamir wasn't even a teenager. And I'll go straight to the part of the conversation where I know, Samaria, you want to go. The idea that after 7 years, his killer is still attempting to win back his job, and the possibility hasn't been ruled out yet. And that, Samaria Rice, drives you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Well, what I want to say is I don't know how anyone can demonize a 12-year-old's character. It is not my fault or anybody's fault that the system is broken and corrupt. My son did.
I think we just, there you go.
Protocols and procedures was broken that day. Timothy Loman and Frank Granback need to be convicted of murder of my 12-year-old son. Timothy Loman was founded to be unfit and not even trainable to be a police officer. So I can't understand why he keep trying to get his job back. His job is over as a law enforcement officer. So he should find another job. And shame on Cleveland for not checking his HR report, as independent chief of police clearly was very transparent with us, meaning us, my attorneys, and myself. What I did come to find out is that the consent decree is very weak. And I have talked to many people about it. One thing we would like to see, and I would like to see, is a special unit that deals with domestic problems. This shouldn't be an officer that show up with a badge and a gun, probably not even in compliant to answer domestic calls, whatever that may be. Secondly, these officers need to understand the sociology of the human brain aspect of when you're dealing with another human being. So when you talk about defunding the police, you really, or they really need to get a professor, get with one of these colleges and team up with them and get some professors in there to teach the sociology classes and get a sociology certificate, because the human mind is very delicate. And apparently these officers are not thinking, they're not thinking, they're just reacting on a broken system, number one. And also, the consent decree needs to be here more than after 2 years. It needs to be here maybe a decade or so, because from my understanding, I've been here 7 years, and this is like the 4th or 5th consent decree, or 3rd or 4th. I mean,
we're into this one for the 5th year, yeah.
My God, Cleveland, Ohio, let's get it together. This don't make no sense. So, and it's a shame that the consent decree is only in 11% compliance. I wrote a few notes down. Another thing I want to say is that when it comes to the United Way and the Cleveland NAACP, and other institutions around the city as well, we need you all to speak more to these public officials. You all are in this with us. You are our community people as well. It's not just on activists and families to fight this system. That's not what this is about. It's for everybody to be fighting this system. You all have grandchildren, sons and daughters. I mean, everybody should be on board with Citizens for Safer Cleveland. Mm-hmm. Everybody should be on board in the city of Cleveland, every organization. You all should be tired of spending money and tax dollars on these settlements. Y'all should be tired. That's what I want to say. And so again, this is just where I'm at, Rick. My son, my family has been destroyed. It is a struggle every day to deal with what I have to deal with, and for Tamir to be global, and I never asked for none of this. So it's a struggle every day for me.
To that point, there's an article about you in the very latest issue of New York Magazine. One line jumped out at me. It says, "You were cast into the center of the movement at the most tragic moment of your life." I look at that as you were a character in a play that was running on every stage in the world, and you had no training for that role. How did you cope with that? Well, you're grieving the death of your baby boy, and suddenly you're a global image.
So, could you repeat that again, Rick? The cut article from the New York Times. What particular what particular line are you? Please, again.
The line was, "You were cast into the center of the movement at the most tragic moment of your life." And I was saying, you weren't ready for that.
Well, no, because everybody come with a past, Rick, okay? And I was coming out of a past trying to get my life back on center. And actually I planned my children's life out. When you're a single parent, that's what you do. You plan your children's life out. You plan what they're gonna do. And that's what I was doing. I was actually trying to move out of Cleveland, Ohio, being in the area for only 9 months. Although I was part of the area at one point in time, many, many years ago, but living in the area of Cadell, in a decent area, they had cleaned it up and everything. I thought we were safe.
Right.
I really thought that I was American citizen that was going to get justice for my son being murdered. And if he was a white boy, he would be certainly alive. Let's not leave that out as well.
We are going to get to that certainly when we bring everybody in, Samaria.
Okay.
Thank you
Sure.
for that.
Thank you.
I appreciate you bringing it up now, though, because it is a point we
Okay.
want to hit.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Lastly, to speak to us is Bernadette Rolen, who also doesn't feel justice was done in her case, actually saying the officer got away with murder. Bernadette, those are harsh words.
Definitely, those are harsh words. And, there's a settlement that was made, that's fine, but the officers are still walking out there. They're free. They're free to live their life the way they want to live their life. They committed a crime, as far as I'm concerned, as far as most of the people that know the story did a report. And in that report, they found that the officer should have been terminated. That didn't happen. So yes, they definitely should have been charged with murder. And I agree with the 3 women that spoke ahead of me. They should be charged with murder.
Just like I asked some of them, what do you want people to know about Daniel besides the circumstances of his death? And like Angelo, he was a young father.
He was 27 years old, a very hardworking man, worked for everything he had. He was my only son, 2 children at the time, 5 and 7, had a high school sweetheart. They lived together. They owned a house in Parma. I mean, he took care of his grandparents, my parents. He was just an all around wonderful person.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't bring him back, but you at least saw some immediate action in that the police department enacted a new policy, mandated officers must have another supervisor with them when they cross that line, go into another city. Does that say to you that at least we know change is possible?
Well, yes, we do know change is possible. That stemmed from the officer. They were Cleveland police officers. My son lived in Parma. He was at his home in Parma. They crossed the line into Parma. They did not notify Parma they were coming in there. They had no right going in there. And they spoke. One of them was on duty. One of them was off duty. The on-duty officer, Matthew Kraska, actually did speak to his supervisor. I think he got some sort of approval to cross the border, but I don't think he told the full truth when he was going there and what he was actually going there for. Mm-hmm. So yes, there is change that I see came about. That was a good point.
You mentioned that there was a settlement involved, but it took you 5 years to get there. People have to wonder, is it worth 5 years to fight, hearing the details over and over, living this case again and again? Had to take a toll on you.
Absolutely take a toll. I mean, the fight was so hard and so strong. And again, a settlement isn't justice. I just have to say that that's not justice. Justice would be seeing those police officers pay for the crimes that they've committed and some sort of consequence for what they did. What they did was wrong. They didn't even get disciplined for what they did. So yes, that was a long, tough fight. And, a settlement, all that settlement did was put his children, in a good position for them for the rest of their life. They don't have their father here. That's more important than any money can be to anybody. So we lost a life, and it's just been difficult.
I asked Brenda, what do you want to hear from the police department? What do you, Bernadette, want to hear from the police department?
First, I'm going to say, Rick, that they've never apologized. They've never came forward. I don't know if they've done that to anyone else, any of the other family members, but no one has come and, apologized, said anything to me, acknowledge that something happened. You can't just bury it under a rug, which I know they hope to do. And I know that, maybe apologies can be an admittance of some sort of guilt or something like that. But, that's a family member. You took their life. And so I think it's so very important that whether it be the mayor, whether it be somebody in the Cleveland Police Department, a representative, or somebody come to the family and apologize to the family. But again, officers should not, the Cleveland police should not be investigating the Cleveland police. So there needs to be some sort of third party involved when there's a police shooting. I don't know how they can, investigate each other. That to me is completely wrong.
Another point I want to bring up once we have everybody all together. Thank you, Bernadette, so much. Appreciate this. Dr. Victoria Winbush, we're not here to analyze the grief of these women, but as you listen, what concepts do you think the community needs to adopt to keep you and me from being here 10 years from now talking to 4 other ladies?
First of all, I really want to express appreciation to how the panelists were able to really bring a human face to their loved one, because I think so often, that gets lost. And so I think that's really important. And I think that part and parcel of that is, as we as community, because these incidents are continuing to happen, they're going to happen again. And I guess I would want the community to realize that there are many sides to what's happened. And I think, fortunately, tonight, our panelists, Ms. Bickerstaff, Ms. Kirkman, Ms. Rice, Ms. Rolen, were able to bring to fore maybe information that the public had not heard. And that's so important, because I heard one of them say, this is about our community. It's not just our loss. This is part of our community. And in order for some change to happen, the 4 of them can't do it, or others in their situation can't do it alone. It's going to take a community effort to make change. And I think that as concerned citizens listen, take in the full story, understand the breadth of it, that it empowers all of us to really join them in wanting to make change.
As a public, as a community, how should we act? What can we do against systemic organizations, whether it's the city, the police department, the police union? Is there a place for grassroots efforts, and how do we utilize that? How do we push that forward?
Well, there's always a place for grassroots. We talk about top-down change, we talk about bottom-up change. And oftentimes in situations like this, the most compelling change is possible because the community, people who are ordinary citizens, rise up and say, this is not what we want for our community. This is not how we want our youth to be treated. This is not how we want our communities to be functioning in terms of being afraid of one another. There was, I think, in the situation that Ms. Rice talked about, her son was 12 years old. And there's research that shows that oftentimes African-American boys are perceived as much older than they really are. And, there was that question, is this an adolescent? Is this a man? And, research has shown that kind of the eyes of the beholder can often, see things that are not there or impose things that are not there.
And I think we heard Samaria say that many times during that aftermath when he was first lost.
And so we have to be educated as citizens, as members of communities. I was listening to a podcast that was saying that, there are communities that know how to do policing. And part of that is because citizens in those communities say, this is not how we want our youth to be treated. This is not how we want our members to be treated. And so pushing back and saying, no, this is not acceptable is a very, very important way of making change, because police are really there to serve and protect. And if something else is happening, then citizens have to say, we have to make changes here.
Yeah, Dr. Winbush, stay with us. We're going to move into the next segment of our program here. Thank you for your input. I'm going to move into questions of a more general nature that all of the women may or may not choose to weigh in on. I want to start this way. We might think the past year has made a difference. People standing up to officers. We've seen the force of the protest. We've seen demands of authority. But then we see 380 people have already been shot and killed by police this year. That's just as of last week. And so far in June, we've had police officers engaged in more fatal shootings. Kentucky and Louisiana last week, Denver last Friday. 950 people have died at the hands of police in the past 12 months. Samaria Rice, do you think the recent actions, the new foundations, the consent decrees, that the attention has just kind of made police more entrenched in who they are and what they do?
More entrenched, you said, like
I did,
not,
yeah.
Not responsible. Not responsible. Well, what I can say is that you know, we need accountability, we need accountability, and accountability for us from a system that has been broken for many, many years looks like conviction for us. At the end of the day, they are human beings. Just because they put on that uniform and that badge and gun, don't qualify them, or disqualify them, as they're not like one of us at the end of the day. At the end of the day, how does the Police Bill of Rights trump the constitutional rights? So it needs to be accountability. They need to be held accountable, period. If it was up to me, we would have a whole new system in this country, but I am aware of who I am, and they know exactly who we are. And so until we get together and come together as one and let them know that this is a corporation that we need to be separated from, they're going to continue to do the things that they do to us. So Rick, I have been under many, many teachings, been in many trainings, and I'm just something different. I'm gonna just be honest with you. I'm not here to, I don't want you all here to feel sorry for us, or just to try to comfort us. We need accountability. My therapy is to make sure that another mother don't have to go through this. You know what I'm saying? And we want accountability. We don't just want donuts with cops or empty promises with politicians. We don't want that. This is a community effort, like the psychologist said. It's y'all community as well, and it's our community as well, and it's we have the activists as well. So we all need to be on one page. How is we gonna get anything changed in the city of Cleveland if we're not on one page? It has been corrupted for over 70 years, from my understanding, and I'm not that age. I'm not 70, okay? So it has been corrupted as long as I've been living and beyond.
Thank you. Brenda, I see your hand. I'll get to you in a second. Bernadette, you made the point about there could be change, but you also made the point that you haven't gotten an apology. So let me ask you that. When we look at 950 people dead in the last 12 months, do you see that they're making any changes at all?
Well, Rick, according to what you just said, it sounds like mine was the only change that's happened. I don't know any other change that has happened. I don't see any changes. The only thing I do see, Rick, is awareness. I see that the city, just people out there, there's social media now, there's the attention is there. So I know that definitely I would say that awareness, is definitely something that is happening. But as Samaria said, people have to act. We can't just sit there and watch this happen. Now that we're aware of what's happening, we need to act and speak up and let them know that we would like action to happen.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Thank you. Can I say one thing, Rick? Also, when I mean by act, and I'm gonna just give you a small example. The United Way and the NAACP, you all need to come out and hit the pavement with us. Other organizations, hit the pavement with us, get involved, boots on the ground. That's what I mean. They need to, just like they see us in the community, they need to see y'all too. But they can know oh, it's really gonna be a change in Cleveland, Ohio. At one point in time, Cleveland, Ohio was predominantly Black and had owned Black businesses. We need to get to where we used to be.
Yeah,
Thank
I know you've called out other foundations, not just the two that are our sponsors tonight. We thank them for what they have done, but you're saying the others that we don't see tonight, they need to be boots on the
Exactly.
ground.
Exactly. Boots on the ground, get in the community, help us gather those petitions, sign on, endorse the city, Citizens for Safer Cleveland, and know that you all should want a civilian oversight too. Y'all part of the community. Don't y'all want something to say? Y'all part of the community too. It ain't just us four. It's more, it's everybody.
It's everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Brenda, I know you wanted to jump in. Go ahead, please.
Well, you mentioned all the numbers of the people that are still dying, and I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna keep saying it. Until a judge in this county starts sending these white officers to kill these Black people to the penitentiary, they're gonna keep doing it. Now, Vonda Evans sent out a strong message in Inkster, Michigan. That officer jumped on and beat Floyd Dent, but thank God he lived. He lived. She sent that officer to the penitentiary. When you start sending these officers to the penitentiary and let them know that they're not above the law, this is where we're gonna start getting change. I'm a part of the Citizens for Safer Cleveland. I believe in that. I want that. We need that. We need accountability along with consequences. Remember that. Accountability for your actions and consequences for what you've done. That's what has to be done. We have to send out a stern message, just like Minnesota did when they convicted that officer, Chauvin, who murdered George Floyd in front of the whole nation. That was ridiculous. That officer needs to be in prison for the rest of his life. He should die in there.
I was going to get to that later, but since you brought it up, and I'll go to Alicia. We haven't heard from you in a while. Alicia Kirkman, talk to me about April 20th, when you saw Derek Chauvin convicted. What went through you?
I don't have too much faith in the system, period. So when I was watching it, because I was literally watching it, about time I started building any emotion about it, because I don't have faith in the system. By the time I walked downstairs to go into my kitchen, another cop had murdered another Black person.
Sure did.
So before I even got to even decide how I actually felt about the whole situation for it to digest, they murdered again. So the way I be feeling that the whole system need to be dismantled and be reformed.
Thank you. I'm glad you brought that point up too. Bernadette, when you saw Chauvin convicted, what went through your heart?
Finally, someone's going to, pay the penalty for doing what they've done. I mean, that's what we've been waiting. That's what all of us wanted. That's what we wanted to see in our cases. But unfortunately, well, I should say fortunately, it happened in this case. But America was watching. All eyes were watching. Probably the world was watching. So, relief.
Brenda?
When I saw it, I'm like Alicia, I believed it. I was glad that it occurred, but it was almost 100 years too long for it to even happen. I was glad that it did. And I hope, and like I said, I just hope he dies in prison.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we've seen come through a lot of these shootings is the sudden cluster of people who are there for the family, so they say. When it comes to coping, let me quote Samaria. She said all the families should be getting therapy, all should be getting the tools to speak for themselves, not have people speak for them. I'll stay with you, Brenda, because you're up on screen. Do you sometimes feel exploited?
Well, for me, I took charge of day one when my brother was killed by police. And the reason why is because I knew better of what occurred that day. So me right now, I let other organizations and people know we need to speak for ourselves. We need to speak for ourselves.
And I'm not gonna.
We need to speak for ourselves and our truths on what happened. We should not have other people speak for us because we know what occurred and we need to be out there to be able to say what has occurred. We need you guys to listen. And I don't want the politicians speaking for me. I don't want nothing personal with the NAACP, nothing personal with United Way, nothing personal with any of these organizations. I want them to listen to me. Let me speak about what happened, what has occurred with me. And like you just said, sir, at 57 years old, I was 39 when my brother got murdered. You damn right. I'm still angry about that. I'm still angry about it because you know what? In my profession, I spoke about Arthur Keith. That's a client of mine who was murdered by a CMHA officer, shot 5 times in the back. 5 times in the back. Desmond Franklin, murdered by an off-duty police officer, shot in the head, because it's still happening. It's still going on. And the issue is we have to stand up, stand together, and stand for ourselves and not have anyone speak for us.
Let me remind the audience, if you have questions for these ladies, 216-307-5632 is the number to text those questions. We'll be getting to those in a few minutes. Dr. Winbush, the idea of exploitation. Nobody wants to be, but we could argue that all 4 of these ladies have been. Their loved ones' names have been co-opted for cause, used to castigate departments as a whole. Are there mechanisms to be used here so that they, and so that we don't feel taken advantage of?
That's a difficult question to answer. And I really appreciate what's been said already in terms of Ms. Bickerstaff, and I think Ms. Rice was wanting to say something about really being able to speak for themselves. And I think that's the value of this forum, which is to, as I said earlier, to give the full, all the sides of the story, the things that have not been said yet. But I think it still comes down to community. And so as long as these things keep happening and we're not, as a community, as a country, saying enough, and let's, take a very deep, hard look at how community policing is being done. There are different experiments happening across the country, different people who are really looking in depth at issues of training, issues of selection. So I think it really is beholden to police, not just in Cleveland, but across the country, to take advantage of the knowledge that's there so that we don't have to have these kinds of conversations. And the family members don't have to feel that they're in the spotlight for something that they didn't ask for, but now they are being forced to live with for the rest of their lives. But we have to, I think the other thing is that we as citizens have to show compassion. This anger is valid. This anger is part of the process that has to be, that they have to, work through in terms of having a loved one taken away in such a violent way. And so we have to listen we have to listen deeply, and we have to hear everything that's being said and not let our own fear or, issues with anger get in the way of doing that.
Doctor, obviously not the looting and the burning, but the protest, the marching, does it help the community to get out there and say to these women and other women, we are at least with you?
I would hope so, but I think that would be something that they would probably in a better position to ask than I.
Alicia, does it help you to see people out there marching behind you and saying what happened to Angela was wrong?
I have mixed emotions on that also, because the crowd, they will be there for you, but they'll disappear. And where we really need them at, they're not where we really need them at. So.
You have all done panels like this previously. You've known each other, you've leaned on each other, but I don't want anybody to think this is some kind of a niche sorority. Every case is different. Every one of you had a different circumstance, different experience. Bernadette, is it hard to convey to people this isn't just a group of moms who lost boys to cops?
Yes, I believe it is. I mean, yes, you know, there's family members that also, you know, are grieving. You know, it's not just us. So yes, you know, most of us are mothers. Brenda, I understand it's her brother. She's not the mother, but yes, I mean, there's other people that's affected, you know, not just us.
Samaria, you've talked about the extended family and how you've all been in trauma really since this happened all those years ago. How do you convey to the audience, to the people listening right now, that it's not just a group of you who share the same thing, but you do have to kind of support each other?
Well, I just know that we all share the same pain, and these feelings and emotions and this grief that we go through is very valid. As the doctor said, when you have to get when you lose your loved one in such a horrific way. I just want to make one note that it's a questionnaire out there posing candidates to endorse the Cppa. I would not suggest that anybody should endorse the Cppa. That Cppa needs to be abolished. It is part of the problem that we face daily, where officers are trying to get their job back and things of that nature. Also, sorry, I got my grandbaby, I gotta go.
I understand, go ahead.
Support the reopening of my son's case, and support the reopening of every case in the state of Ohio that needs to be reopened. Every case in the state of Ohio that needs to be reopened, folks should be supporting that as well. And also, we have a Justice for Campaign for Tamir, if folks could support that as well. I just wanted to make a note of that. I don't have a lot of time, like due to the type of work that I have to do.
Understood.
You know, and deal with my children on a daily. This is all they have is me. All they have is me. I'm still a mom. I'm very busy, the CEO and the founder of the Tamir Rice Foundation. And, you know, I'm still a mother and a grandmother at the end of the day, and my children need me. You know what I'm saying? To hear their brother's name in the media constantly, that is something that I struggle with daily. So just to let you all know that.
We said we wanted to keep it 100. That's a good point.
Yes.
She just brought up a really good point about the rest of Ohio. Last June in a rally at the State House, Adrienne Hood, another Ohio mom who lost a son to multiple rounds of police gunfire, said, I'm quoting, "There are people in that building," pointing at the State House, "there are people in that building making the laws for this state that are against respecting Black lives. We know the rate at Black Americans being killed by police is more than twice as high as the rate for white Americans. Dr. Winbush, maybe it's not overt racism, but it's a factor we really cannot ignore."
No, we can't ignore that. And I'm glad that you raised that point. I'm sure many in the audience know about the Washington Post took it upon themselves, that's the newspaper, about, was it in 2015, to begin to track the number of shootings from, by police. And as you had cited, there's nearly 1,000 every year, and we're well on our way to making that true for this year as well. I think the most recent data showed that about 181 of those were in Ohio. They break it down by state, but they don't break it down by city. And what they've found is that the rate for African Americans is twice that of whites. And so that does raise the question about the impact of race on, what transpires when someone Black is approached by police. And, we know about racism, we know about implicit bias. And so sometimes, we get into this kind of difficult situation where individuals may in fact have implicit bias and may not be aware of it. And so that again kind of circles back to this whole issue of training and understanding who we're sending out to serve and protect our citizens. And again, there's more and more happening in terms of supporting and assisting police departments with the work of really the training part as well as the assessment, because you may not know what somebody is capable of, but I think I heard the panelists allude to, if a police officer is repeating some troubling behavior over and over again, that needs assessing.
That's it.
Yeah, and I don't know which of you said it earlier that if he'd been white, he'd probably be alive. Brenda, that's a point that I think you've made before when we've been talking.
Yeah, see, the issue that I have in doing the type of work that I do, I see this all the time, okay? They approach other white people different than they approach Black people, okay? Like, for example, Raymond Chipkins with my brother. He said, he lied. He said that my brother drew a gun on him. Okay, my brother threw a gun. Threw a gun away, and drawing it on you is two different things. And he shot him 5 times in the back. Now, had that been a white boy, 27 years old, throwing a weapon, he wouldn't be dead. He would still be alive. And what he did to make it the icing on the cake, he said he drew the gun on me, and this is their favorite line, sir. I was in fear of my life. That's the phrase. When they hear I'm in fear of my life, that means justification is coming. That means it's going to be justified. That's the famous word. I'm afraid for my life. That's what they've done in all of our cases. I'm afraid. And this is why your loved one is dead. But this is the thing. The city helped them with their statements to make these type of statements to the public and themselves to get them cleared.
Bernadette, weigh in here. Obviously, your son was not African-American, but did you hear that same thing? I was in fear.
Absolutely, absolutely. I honestly, Rick, when this all started, the Parma police, they assured me that they were going to investigate like it was their son. That's what the officer told me. And little did I know that they were going to come back. I think I said this. Brenda is the one that said, oh, they say that all the time. And I'm like, they do? I really had no idea they say that all the time. But yes, they'll say they were afraid for their life. So the shooting is justified. And I'll also say it in my case, and I'm sure in the other cases, they don't even interview the officers until 24 to 48 hours later. But yet, if it was you or I that something happened to, they have us in custody, or they take our statements immediately. And I know, like I said, in my case, they didn't talk to those officers for at least 48 hours, if not longer.
Last thing before we go to the audience participation here, and I'll stick with you because you're on screen. Do you think we need a mandate, Bernadette, that all police shootings are investigated by outside agencies, not by the department that employs the officer involved in the shooting?
Absolutely, 100%. Absolutely. Like I said, I think I even said it earlier, I can't, how can they, investigate themselves? They cannot.
Alicia Kirkman, same thing. Do you think that it should be an outside investigation at all times?
Absolutely should be, because the coroner office and the police investigated my son's death.
Brenda?
I'm gonna tell you something, you have to be careful. We can get an outside independence, ladies, investigation, but you have to be careful that that outside agency have not had recycled people or recycled cops that was formerly with Cleveland and went on to other agencies. For example, I'm gonna use this for an example. In the Desmond Franklin case, his name is Dan Caceres. Dan Caceres was a county prosecutor that was responsible for wrongfully convicting people. But now he's with the Attorney General's office doing these police cases when they're sent to an outside agency. So we gotta be aware of the recycling dilemma that they use. We have to be aware of the recycling.
And Samaria Rice, same thing. You want an outside agency looking at what Cleveland in your case did.
Can you hear me?
I got you, go ahead.
Yeah, well, personally, I think the system needs to be abolished, but since it has to be reformed, as one of the family members said, that definitely got to be careful that it's not recycled police or government officials that's that have problems investigating other police departments in the past. So definitely, it should definitely also be an outside prosecutor, and maybe a juror of their peers, and a juror from the community that they destroy and they harm, instead of getting all white jurors and things like that. And in Tamir's case, Timothy Loman and Frank Granbeck wasn't even cross-examined. So how in the world is a jury gonna be able to make a decision off of that? Tim McGinty tainted my son's case, and he had no intentions of giving Tamir no type of justice. Basically a lie to my face. That's what I would say about that.
Thank you. We need to move into the part of the conversation now where the audience will be asking the question. That's you folks out there. I'll be taking some of the text. Again, it's going to be curated by Alicia Ellis. She's the founder of the multimedia platform Mas Luray. I may have follow-up questions. I'll certainly stay a part of the conversation, but the questions are yours. Alicia, welcome.
Thank you, Rick. I just want to say thank you to all the panelists as well for taking the time out to have this needed conversation as a collective. It's an honor to just be amongst you all to continue to move this work and the action items and solution forward. With that being said, we do have a couple community-led questions. One being, how do Black families balance the need to carry a weapon for self-defense, yet try and avoid letting illegal gun possession be used as a media narrative on how lethal force was used and perhaps justified? So we can just open that question up, Rick.
Okay, Brenda, why don't you start us off there? Did you get the whole question?
Yeah, could you repeat that question?
Sure. It says, how do Black families balance the need to carry a weapon for self-defense, yet try to avoid letting legal gun possession be used as a media narrative on how lethal force was used and perhaps justified? This seems like a question is in context to something that had happened with the police officer that maybe caused a shooting or even a death.
I guess I'm kind of confused with the content of that question. What is it asking? I'm not understanding what is it saying.
Well, if I can jump in there, you had made the point earlier, this is why I went to you first, that Craig did have a weapon with him. She's saying, yeah, she's saying, why do Black men feel like they have to have the gun?
Okay, so my thing is, okay, so what, he had a weapon. So what? And he had a weapon, so what? Big deal. The issue is, he had the weapon. The issue is, did he draw the gun on Raymond Chipkias? That's the issue. That's the whole issue. Did he draw the gun on Raymond Chipkias? And he did not. Why? Because Black men carry weapons. That means that they should be gunned down by the police. They don't have a right to carry a weapon for protection. Don't go there with me on that question.
Brenda, in your profession, though, you do see a lot of people who do carry weapons.
Exactly. Exactly. But guess what? I don't even carry a weapon. But if I did carry a weapon, that doesn't mean that I'm going to shoot the police.
I would just add, it sounds like the question is asking why does the media then change the narrative to saying if someone was carrying a gun, that justifies the police officer to use drastic force in that scenario.
Okay, so let's go down that road. Well, you know what? Because sometimes the media is the police. Sometimes the media is the first police. Because sometimes the media asks certain questions that they think or know that the police may ask, because the media a lot of times work close with the police. And it's also done to pump it up, to pump up the information of the story.
Can I answer that too?
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, well, I believe as a human being in this country, it's our constitutional right to carry a gun. So I don't understand, how that question came about, but also Ohio is an open carry state.
It is.
So that question is irrelevant for any state that's an open carry state. The Black man, the white man, the Chinese man is allowed to carry a gun. And also it's our constitutional right to carry a gun. So as the Black man, it's our constitutional right. So although the constitutional is the Constitution is messed up and it needs to be redone over, not amended. But it's our constitutional right. So that's what I would say to that question, because my son had a toy gun, and they don't even, and while they were accusing him as a 20-year-old male, they should have known that this is an open carry state, and they should have approached the situation, accordingly. They don't even know if he had a license to carry a opposably gun. You know what I'm saying? They don't even know if he had a license to carry. They just reacted, shoot first and then ask question later. But it seems to me when it comes to a white man, they could de-escalate just fine with no problems. So I don't want to hear nothing about no black man carrying no gun. That's our constitutional right. Just like the white man carry guns and do everything else, we can do it too. Thank you.
Next question, Alicia.
Yes, our next question is, when the panelists talked about the system reform, right? Where should public policy changes take place? The federal government, the state government, or the local community level? Which would be the most effective?
All three.
All three? Well, that's the short and easy answer.
All three, absolutely.
All three.
Yep. Because city council, we got to start with city council and up to the Congress and the Senate and all of that. And I guess it's like a chain of commands, a progress. Like they say, oh, everything take a progress. Not a progress, I'm sorry, a process.
Right.
There you go.
Dr. Winbush, weigh in for me here. Where do you see legislation going that would help to, following that question?
I can't say that I have kept track of all the legislation that's pending, but I know that there is some pending. And, oftentimes things get lost in committee. And that's where the advocacy is important. And all of us as citizens being informed about what is at stake and what it is that we need to see happen. And I do agree with the answer that change is needed at all three levels. Sometimes it's easier to focus in on what's right in front of you, but there is a ripple effect, there is a process. So as one thing gets addressed, then there's energy and impetus to keep the process moving.
I would think it is certainly difficult to get the attention of a senator because just two of them cover the 11 million of us. But as you work down, this is a case where maybe we do start small. Start with your ward council member and go up from there if that's what it takes. Brenda Bickerstaff, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say was you said something. You said the senators is like, how many of us? 11 million?
In Ohio.
For 11 million, but guess what? They can take the time. They take the time to get our vote. So the same energy they take to get our vote, when they say it's 11 million, there's only two of us, use that same energy to get these laws changed. But what I want to urge is for the residents in the city of Cleveland to sign this petition for the citizens of a safer Cleveland. And I want to urge all 93 families that's been affected by this, we are best in control when we come together in numbers. All of us have to come together, not just us four. It's 93. All of us have to come together.
Right. We made the point earlier that all of you lean on each other and know each other, but you're right. You're just a small group, unfortunately, of a large number of families here who know.
Exactly.
Ms. Ellis, go ahead.
In the case of obviously all of the cases that we have represented on the panel, individually and collective with other families that you may know, where do you guys find support within the community during these tragic encounterments, but also post?
During and after, yeah. Go ahead, Alicia.
I find it with other families. We support each other.
Was it that way right away? Did anybody reach out to you?
Right away with me 14 years ago, it was totally different. It was totally different 14 years ago. Families wasn't really connected the way they are now. I 14 years ago, I probably had like Black on Black Crime Incorporation in the city of Cleveland, Revolution Network. I had those two organizations that supported me. And I think about 6 years ago, that's when I started meeting, about 6 or 7 years ago, I started meeting other mothers and families global.
Let me ask.
I'm sorry, if I could just weigh in on that, Rick, I would just say the same thing. It's been 10 years since I lost my son. There wasn't a lot of awareness. I'll use that term again, because that's really what I think is happening with social media. But myself, I'm speaking for my family. We went to Cornerstone of Hope. That's a grief counseling organization, a wonderful organization that is, they do personal sessions as well as group sessions. And I happen to be in a group with other parents that lost children. And it didn't have to be, my daughter-in-law was in a group with people that were murdered. So she, was comforted with other, similar cases, whether it was male or female, whether, it didn't matter, but the people that were murdered were in a group. I was in, someone that lost a child group. And I continue, I think I told you in my bio says that I am a volunteer at Cornerstone of Hope. I just think it's a wonderful organization, and that's definitely, they can help with, grief counseling.
If this happens again, I hate to say when this happens again, but if this happens again, Brenda, you pick up the phone and just call Alicia and go, it's time, let's go.
But Alicia, me and Alicia do that all the time. She'll call me and say, okay, let's go. We got to go to this family. Or did you talk to so-and-so, we got to go out there and reach them. But this is what I want to see happen. I want us to end this. I don't want another family member to go through what we've been through. I lost 2 sisters this year. 2 sisters. One was 76 and one was 80. The one that was 76 said, you got to keep fighting for our brother, because it was wrong and what happened. And unfortunately, they're not here now. We have to end this, and we have to end it, and we have to end it once and for all. We have to band together, let these politicians know. We have to let the country know we're not going to tolerate this. We have the power. We have it. We have to come together and use it up against the forces, and that's the politicians.
Samaria writes, you took part of your settlement money and created a foundation. You want to help children, I know, but does this foundation, in the other sense of the word, also help support people who are going to join this club?
Well, I created the Tamir Rice Foundation, and that's one of my ways of giving back to the community and making sure that I service the children since Tamir was 12 years old. And I support in partnership up with folks that want to partner and support me as well. So, I mean, I can't say that all my money is gonna go to the community, because I still have to live and I still have children that I'm taking care of. But I have invested in the community, and I will continue to invest in the community to make sure that we can start learning how to love ourselves a little bit more and get the political education that we need to keep striving and beat the oppressor at the end of the day. So that's what I'm all about, is making sure that we have a chance at Black liberation and creating Black liberation. That's what I'm all about.
Thank you. Alicia Ellis.
Yes, I have another question here in the sense of maybe a potential solution and maybe just some feedback from the panelists on this. Is a county-wide police misconduct database something you think would be helpful?
You know what? Okay. Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, let me tell you this, and I think that would be perfect. I was in Chicago about a couple of years ago, Alicia remember. I went down to a young lady, her name is LaToya Howe. Her son was killed by police there in Chicago in a suburb. Well, anyway, I met a Chicago police officer and on his phone, he showed me they have a database, and the database shows how many complaints they've had. It shows how many times they got suspended. And that database goes all through Chicago. And I think not only should we have one for the county, we should have it for the whole state of Ohio to keep up the complaints against them, their discipline, all their training. We should have that. It should go statewide, because then another agency can make a determination if they want to hire this individual as an officer for their city. That's very much needed, yes.
Thank you. Bernadette, you made the point that you had interaction with the Parma Police Department. Do you feel like it would help if the people who are officers, who are in law enforcement, knew that all the rest of us could see what's going on there?
Yes, definitely, because like I said, Parma initiated the investigation, and then it moved over to Cleveland after they did their part, because it was Cleveland police officers, but yet it happened in Parma. So yes.
Alicia Kirkman, do you want to weigh in?
Yes, we need it, so we could really make sure, see what's really going on. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Alicia Ellis.
Yes. Can we talk about your personal views on qualified immunity in regards to police?
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody responded to that. Alicia, go ahead. You can go first. Kirkman.
Qualified immunity is what protected John Lundy. That's what protected John Lundy. 14 years. He's been protected to the point that he was able to retire last year in June. So therefore, that's why we have to end that qualified immunity. Yep. Go ahead, Brenda.
Go ahead, Brenda.
Oh, the qualified community, the qualified immunity is a blanket that is used, and dealing with a lot of civil cases that I've worked with attorneys that I've investigated for them when they're doing these wrongful deaths by police officers. That's the biggest hurdle. That qualified immunity is written in stone and gold to protect that officer, so you cannot touch that officer, and that officer would not be held accountable. We have to demolish that qualified immunity and make all of these officers accountable for what they do when they get in situations like this with these shootings.
Alicia's case, he was off duty. Bernadette, in your case, he's out of his jurisdiction.
Right.
Does that frustrate you, Bernadette, that he could, still have that immunity even though he was not serving as an officer in his assigned spot at the time?
Absolutely. And not only were they out of their jurisdiction, one of the officers was off the clock. So kind of the same scenario, one on the clock, one off the clock, and outside their jurisdiction.
Okay. I think we heard unanimity there. Alicia, next question, please.
Thank you. What can we do as community, as leaders, as organization to better support you and bring forth solutions and action?
Staying with us against these officers who have murdered and continue to do things against the citizens in Cleveland. Not only officers have murdered people, officers have wrongfully incarcerated individuals for 20 and 30 and 40 years for misconduct. And what happens? Okay, they get out. I've done cases, and I'm doing a case now, where a young man is being wrongfully convicted of a charge. Okay, you get them out, just like our loved ones, they put a price on these people and say, well, we'll give you a couple of $1 million, you'll be okay, go ahead and take that. And they've lost 20 or 30 years of their lives.
Anybody else want to jump in?
What was the question again? I'm sorry. Oh, how can organizations still support us and things like that? Well, I do like standing with us and supporting us, but also again, you all need to talk to those public officials, which is your community neighbors as well. It's not just on us. It's not just on the activists. as presidents and CEOs of the United Way, the Greater Congregation of Cleveland, and the NAACP vice presidents and treasurers. You all have some weigh in on this, as well as the media and things like that. You all have some weigh ins to talk to your colleagues or neighbors. This is going to have to be a whole effort, and supporting, the families and getting the change that we need desperately in Cleveland, which is that civilian oversight and giving us the accountability that we well deserve.
Thank you. We got about 10 minutes left. Anybody who wants to text in more questions, 216-307-5632 is that number. Alicia, Kirkman, a theme to family lawsuits is this claim of excessive force by police. Do you think any of these deaths, the consent decree, the attention paid, has made any change at all in Cleveland in the time that you've been going through what you've gone through?
No change. No,
That's got to be tremendously frustrating.
It's very frustrating because it haven't been any change. I mean, I keep seeing the same story over and over again. They fear for their life. They the person was running for their life. We hear the same story over and over again. It doesn't change, and no one gets charged with murder.
Brenda, consent decree, has it made a difference?
It's a start, but it really hasn't made a difference, because guess what? You have a federal judge that's over the consent decree, okay? You would think that with this here, that the officers would be like, okay, you know what? Big brother is watching us. We better watch what we're doing and watch our actions. They've gotten worse. That's why I say the way to deal with this, they have to be incarcerated. The consent decree is not going to be enough. Citizens for Safer Cleveland, implementing the commission here will be a big start, because they will make sure it will be an independent investigation with subpoena power that has some teeth in it that can allow those officers to have accountability and consequences.
Dr. Winbush, love to hear your opinion on this. Do you think it's made a difference? Can it make a difference?
I think it can make a difference. I think change comes because there is a need for change, but then there is also a will to make the change. And I think oftentimes the will is not there. I would say again, in terms of the panelists, they did not have a choice. They had to face what had happened to them. They had to make decisions about carrying on with their lives and make a decision about, fighting for what they feel is justice. I think them doing it by themselves is not going to be enough. I think all of us as citizens in our political systems, our police force, everyone has to face up to what's happened. And I like that quote of James Baldwin, and I think it's used a lot, but I think it's very appropriate. And it says, not everything that's faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. And so we all have some facing up to do at every level, individual, community, government, police. We just got to face where we are at this point and make some choices.
I made the point earlier that you teach courses in human behavior. Do you think these 4 women have behaved as we would expect? Is this what we all face now? Should, God forbid, it be us in their position?
I think they have shown incredible strength, resilience. And, you hear that all the time, particularly as Black women, strong Black women, angry Black women. But it's not about that. It's about making a decision about how you want to live your life and knowing that something terrible has happened that would never be wished on anyone. And with that, still being able to move forward. I wanted to say just a bit about trauma too, because the other thing that I, teach about is the impact of historical and generational trauma. And African Americans, we're not the only group of people who have suffered trauma. We go back to enslavement, we go back to Jim Crow, and all of that in some way, even though it's not like we lived through it, when we think about how we were socialized as children, when we think about the stories we heard from our parents, when we think about just things that we're allowed to do or not do, you know, trauma carries forward. So here we are now in 2021, it's still happening that are lopping on to what's already there in terms of, you know, some people call it historical trauma or generational trauma. And so at some point, again, it's about the facing and the stopping and the changing of, you know, how we want to be as people, as citizens, as family members, as individuals.
We'll have to leave it there. Dr. Victoria Winbush, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Mm-hmm.
Alicia Ellis, thank you for your time. She's the founder of the co-founder of the women's empowerment group, Fierce Women on Board. Alicia, thank you. And to our star panelists, Brenda Bickerstaff, Alicia Kirkman, Samaria Rice, Bernadette, Rolen, our condolences still with you even after all these years. Thank you so much for your honesty and your input tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Augie Napoli, thank you for inviting me on. Thank you for listening to the conversation.
Rick, thank you very much. And Alicia Ellis, thank you too for your facilitation of the questions. I just want to say a special thank you to our panelists, Brenda Bickerstaff, Alicia Kirkham, Samaria Rice, Bernadette Rolen, and of course, Dr. Winbush. You know, what can I say other than thank you for sharing? You have no idea how important this will be to a much wider audience to hear that. You really honor us with being here tonight, and we appreciate very much your participation. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's keep the work going. Please join us again in July for our next community conversation. And also, please know that we're grateful to our sponsors, WVIZ, Channel 19, ideastream, City Club, to Rockwell Automation. Thank you all very much for your support, Tri-C. We really appreciate that. This is truly a community conversation. So with that, I'll just say goodnight for all of us at United Way and for my colleague and our partner at the NAACP, Danielle Sidnor. Thanks for being with us.